Welcome. I'm Jim Kozel, the president of the Niguel Summit Homeowners Association. We have prepared this presentation to update all homeowners about the fire prevention requirements of the state of California and through their county enforcement arm, the Orange County Fire Authority, commonly referred to as OCFA. This presentation will be broken down into 3 areas. Rod Henderson, a board member, will discuss a historical review. Juan Huerta from OCFA will review fire prevention requirements. And finally, Lot Steffi from our primary consultant, Mosaic Consulting, Inc., will review our current plans and process. But first, a little background. Niguel Summit is composed of 12 districts with 1,432 accounts. We say accounts rather than homeowners because Niguel Summit is composed of unique developments which cover the entire Niguel Summit hillside. There are 2 gated communities, Coronado Point and Palmilla, 3 sub-associations of townhomes and condominiums, La Vista, Jamaica, and Capri, an apartment complex, Niguel Summit Apartments, and 6 single-family home developments. Although compliance with OCFA guidelines and fire prevention are very important, your board of directors are concerned with 2 other very important issues, which are slope stability and annual assessments. With the collapse of the Estral slope in 1998, which is located in Niguel Summit, each area identified by OCFA for landscape removal is reviewed by a geotechnical company to provide an evaluation of slope stability and erosion potential. This consultant has a rating system of 1 to 5. The board has never performed work on a slope that is either a 4 or 5, which are described as high and moderate erosion susceptibility. So far, we have only removed vegetation on slopes that are a 1, 2, or 3, which are described as least, low, and low to moderate erosion susceptibility. If a 4 or 5 is reported, this geotechnical report is submitted to the OCFA, and they are informed that we will not be removing any vegetation. Several areas with a 405 have been reported in this way to OCFA, and no work has been done. The second area is annual assessments. Over the past 2 years, the board has increased assessments by about 20% each year. We are very cognizant of the financial stress that this presents to all homeowners in the Niguel Summit. So we are attempting to complete this project over a period of 15 years. But we cannot be assured that this time frame will be approved by OCFA, nor will we be able to assure homeowners of any further increases in monthly assessments. Before we provide more information of our plans, I want to highlight and thank the groups of volunteers that make up the Niguel Summit Homeowners Association. First, the 12 district delegates, the architectural committee members, the landscape committee, and finally, the board of directors. For a historical review, Rod Henderson, a homeowner since December 1987, a board member since 2012, and a member of the Landscape Committee will provide an overview of our history.
We're here today to talk about our 33-year-old landscaping and where we need to go from here. However, to help us understand where we need to go, let's take a very quick look at how we got here. As we all know, the developers' marketing vision for Niguel Summit was a Mediterranean theme, from the color of the homes, the street names, and to the landscape design. They developed it, they built a variety of homes, and once all the homes were sold, the maintenance of the property was turned over to us, the homeowners that make up Niguel Summit Community Association. Let's take a look back. It all started with the original blueprints for Niguel Summit submitted by the developers. This shows the planting details for the trees, the shrubs, and the ground cover that we now have. As shown These plans were approved by the Environmental Management Agency and the Orange County Fire Department Fire Prevention Bureau. As you can see in the enlargement of the blueprint we just looked at, which represents a portion of the community, the developers of Niguel Summit were also required to address fuel modification maintenance. OCFA had a list of requirements to be addressed by the developers before the plans were approved. Important to note here, it states, quote, subject to field inspection, unquote. Since our inception as Niguel Summit Community Association, we have been doing field inspections dealing with fuel modification zones. This is not to be confused with defensible space zones, which we will be covering with Juan Herta, Senior Fire Prevention Specialist with OCFA. Eventually, the developers moved on and Niguel Summit Community Association took over the maintenance of the property. In order to maintain our landscaping, we developed a master rotation schedule to maintain our very large property. This early map breaks out 22 maintenance work zones for Niguel Summit. The colors represent the months the crews would work in that area. For example, blue work zones were addressed in January and then again in July, 6 months later. Typical commercial gardening work, mowing the grass, trimming the ground cover, and weeding and more. The acacia bushes you see on our slopes make up the majority of our ground cover. Tree trimming is done every 1 or 2 years depending upon tree species. Jumping ahead now to 2021. As you drive through Niguel Summit, you see our Mission landscape crews on our slopes trimming the acacia and other plants. Mission has taken the original map we just looked at and expanded those 22 work zones to now 55 work zones. There are 3 crews, a crew A, a crew B, and a crew C, plus an irrigation tech on site 5 days a week. Each crew has from 3 to 5 workers. As you can imagine, this is a lot of people to keep track of. For that, we have a tracking document that details the progress of each crew so that we know when and where the crews are working at all times. Shown here is the rotation schedule map for only part of Crew A's responsibility, which they need to maintain twice each year. As you can see, each crew has a lot of ground to cover. It's interesting to note that our acacia bushes, which are now huge in size, which were planted from 5-inch pots per the blueprints, this species of acacia planted in 1987, it will be replaced with other approved acacia redlands ground cover called desert carpet. Lot Steffi, our landscape consultant, will explain more on that later in our presentation. Through the years, we've worked with various OCFA fire prevention specialists assigned to our community of Niguel Summit. As you may know, during a wildfire, fire embers have been verified to travel up to 5 miles. This is why it's important to all of us, no matter where we live in Niguel Summit, to maintain our fuel mod areas. Currently, our landscape maintenance company, Mission Landscape, meets with our OCFA fire prevention specialist, Juan Herta, and they inspect these areas on a regular basis. This map details in red the designated fuel mod areas we must maintain. The blue boxes show work status through November of this year. As you might have noticed on the previous slide, Aliso Summit Trail is a significant portion of the fuel mod area we must maintain. Most of us are aware that the Aliso Summit Trail borders our association property for a little over 2 miles. Many are surprised, however, to learn that Niguel Summit Community Association is required to maintain property and fuel mod areas along the length of the trail at a significant expense to us. Based on field inspections with our fire prevention specialists in 2013, we removed all the acacia behind the communities of Capri, Jamaica, Palmyra, and Coronado Point. We replanted the entire Aliso Summit Trail behind previously mentioned communities that I told you about with ice plant cuttings. To save money, we took the cuttings from ice plant growing along the slope on Clubhouse Street near the Crown Valley intersection. That's a brief overview of our history concerning our community's landscape. The good news, Niguel Summit is surrounded by wonderful open spaces, as you can see here. These open spaces are defined by the Orange County Fire Authority as Wild Urban Interface, or WUI. WUI is not the bad news for us, because that is what makes Niguel Summit special and a great place to live. but it is also the reason we need to take our special care to make our community as safe as possible. Our common ground with OCFA is safety. That is why our relationship with OCFA is so important to all of us. As you will hear, this is going to be a long-term project moving forward. We have called this effort CASE, which stands for Creating a Safer Environment. We must expect some noise and dust and a changing landscape look when our 33-year-old acacia is removed and replaced with new plant material. Rest assured, it will be worth it in the end. Just give it some time. Now when you hear about CASE projects and you see slopes being cleared, you will know we are working towards making Niguel Summit a safer community for all. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Rod. And as Rod indicated, from 1987 to 2018, Niguel Summit was required to maintain fuel modification zones around the community to protect us against fires, and this fuel modification expense was managed through our annual budget. So what changed? In 2019, California law required HOAs to maintain 100 feet of defensible space for all homes located in a very high fire hazard severity zone. This expense was a new expense, and we didn't have any reserves to cover even a small portion of this expense. As you can see from this map obtained from the City of Laguna Niguel website, the area of Niguel Summit is located in this very high fire hazard severity zone. Joining us now is Juan Huerta, who is the Senior Fire Prevention Specialist for Orange County Fire Authority.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, I want to acknowledge and thank the Niguel Summit Homeowners Association Board for organizing this presentation and providing OCFA with this platform. Next, I want to personally thank all of you for attending, and our hope is that you will all understand not only the requirements, but why OCFA is requiring the vegetation management throughout the Niguel Summit community. OCFA has been working closely with the City of Laguna Niguel to ensure the communities in the city are informed and understand the potential impacts from wildfire and how they can be better prepared. Once again, my name is Juan Huerta. I am a Senior Fire Prevention Specialist in the Community Wildfire Mitigation section here at the Orange County Fire Authority. As we begin the presentation, I want to first comment that all of the information we are going to discuss today can be found on the OCFA website, which is ocfa.org/RSG, and is part of the Ready, Set, Go program. This program was developed for residents explaining how to prepare for a wildfire and what to do in the event of a wildfire. I would like to go over first the differences between fuel modification and defensible space, which are part of the vegetation management for the community. Oftentimes these terms are used interchangeably, however they do differ. Fuel modification is a condition at the time of development for a community being built in or adjacent to a wildfire risk area. This plan details fuel modification zone distances for maintenance, specific plant pallets, mandatory plant species removal, and may also have specific construction requirements, and is typically on the perimeter of a community adjacent to the brush-covered land. Defensible space, on the other hand, is mandated for those other areas not shown on a fuel modification plan, but falling within a very high fire hazard severity zone. Per the California Fire Code, it is the responsibility of every person who owns, leases, controls, operates, or maintains a structure in the very high fire hazard severity zone to create and maintain defensible space on their property, 100 feet from the structure or to the property line. The intent of both fuel modification and defensible space is to provide firefighters a safe area to defend homes by reducing the potential of direct flame and radiant heat, as well as provide a passive protection and increase the chances a home survives a wildfire. The laws and regulations guide us in requirements to inspect and enforce this vegetation management. These codes were adopted and developed to help better protect our communities. Chapter 49 of the California Fire Code is specifically dedicated to the requirements for wildland-urban interface fire areas. These areas are where developments meet or intermingle with undeveloped wildland vegetation. This section of the California Fire Code requires that California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, or CAL FIRE, to classify lands into fire hazard severity zones. This chapter of the Fire Code also speaks to the local responsibility areas and the Government Code, which I will get into a little further. For those that are not aware, the entire community of Niguel Summit falls within a very high fire hazard severity zone and is subject to the defensible space requirements for vegetation management. The fire hazard severity zone maps are published and provided by the state and locally adopted by our cities. A Niguel Summit resident asked if there was a way a community can be excluded from the very high fire hazard severity zone. The simple answer is no. There is no action a community or property owner can take to be excluded from these maps. As many have seen over the last few years, fires have both increased in size and in frequencies. They have also begun to make their way further into interior parts of many communities and developments. The local responsibility areas, also known as the LRA, are areas in both the incorporated cities and unincorporated where the local government is responsible for wildfire protection. These LRA areas served by OCFA have not only adopted the California Fire Code, which states that those wildland areas in the LRA are also subject to the requirements of defensible space from the Government Code. Our cities have also adopted, as an amendment to the Fire Code, OCFA C05 guideline, which is the Vegetation Management Guideline, technical design for new construction, fuel modification plans, and maintenance program. This guideline also contains information about the vegetation management maintenance guidelines for homeowners, for those existing homes. This guideline was created to help clarify requirements for vegetation management in our jurisdiction and also contains useful information regarding plant spacing, the undesirable plant list, and the approved plant list. Lastly, it was created with landscape companies and property managers in mind to provide a better understanding of how to manage the vegetation in a fire-safe manner in areas with vegetation management requirements. This guideline can be found on the OCFA website. Now I'll take the opportunity to speak about this new Assembly Bill, AB 38, that was passed a few years ago. Beginning July 1st of 2021, sellers of properties in the LRA Very High and High are required to provide documentation to the buyer that the property is in compliance with defensible space requirements. Since the state has not yet published the High, OCFA is currently only required to perform inspections in the Very High. This will change once the state publishes the new maps, and OCFA will be required to also perform inspections in the high areas. If an inspection has been conducted by OCFA within the last 6 months at the time of sale, the inspection is considered valid. Another option is both parties can enter into a contractual agreement where the buyer will absorb the responsibility to have an inspection performed within 1 year of purchase. There is a portal on the OCFA website specific to AB 38. You can enter in an address and determine if you are required to have that inspection. There is an email address to submit a request for inspection, which is at no cost to the seller. What I'd like to show you now are some statistics. This is a bar graph from 2017 showing the number of homes that were damaged or destroyed and where they are located on the fire hazard severity zone map. Some of the significant fires at this time were the Tubbs and Thomas Fire. These CAL FIRE numbers for structures located in the Very High, damaged or destroyed, totaled 2,215 structures. The remaining areas had a total of 9,857 damaged or destroyed structures. That means well over 80% of those damaged or destroyed homes were not in the Very High. Now, what do those numbers mean? To us, that paints a few pictures. One that says the majority of those damaged or destroyed structures could be attributed to the lack of vegetation management, or could be attributed to the main reason we lose homes in wildfires, through ember intrusion. The fact that the construction requirements for new structures in the Very High are built to the Chapter 7A standard of the California Building Code. New structures built to this standard are designed to withstand more direct flame and radiant heat and designed to reduce ember intrusion. Lastly, we are seeing these fires burn further into the interior areas of the communities. Looking at the data, this is one of the reasons we are beginning to focus on home hardening and the home ignition zone. What is a hardened home? It is a home that has been strengthened to mitigate the effects of a wildfire, strengthened against radiant and against direct flame, mitigated through vegetation management and reduction of combustible material around the structure. Also, strengthened against ember intrusion. These embers can travel for miles during wind-driven events. Measures can be taken to reduce against all three. So how do you harden a home? By protecting the areas of vulnerability. So what are some of the areas of vulnerability on a home? I'll touch on a few. Roofs. Using ignition-resistant material and sealing gaps and replacing missing tiles, and keeping the roof free of leaf litter and debris, which may ignite due to embers. Gutters. Keeping them clean and free of leaf litter and debris, which has potential to ignite due to falling embers, which may ignite siding, roofing, or if vinyl, may melt and fall next to the home, possibly igniting the home siding or surrounding vegetation. Eaves. Boxed in or sealed in a manner to keep embers out. However, another option is using caulking and a fresh coat of paint to reduce the potential of embers getting in. But as upgrades are made, please consider attic ventilation. The last thing we want is to solve one problem and create another. Vents. Replacing existing vents with listed baffled vents, but using 1/8" ignition-resistant mesh to reduce the potential of ember intrusion and ignition is another option. Windows. Replacing existing older windows with dual paned with one pane tempered to reduce the likelihood of windows breaking and embers getting in. However, keeping vegetation 5 feet away may also be an option to reduce the likelihood of direct flame and radiant heat, which may cause windows to break or vinyl frames to melt, causing the windows to fall and again leading to embers getting inside of the home. Siding. Having stucco or masonry is great, but you also want to make sure all gaps at the junction points, including under stucco at the weep screed, are also sealed tight to reduce the potential of direct flame or radiant heat, which could lead to the structure igniting. When we discuss the home ignition zone, we specifically mean the immediate zone, which is the first 5 feet from the structure out. Some of the things to avoid include the use of organic mulch within the first 2 feet of the home. Mulch is ember receptive and may lead to home ignition due to the ease at which it may ignite through ember casting. Using non-combustible alternatives like rocks are better options, but consider using larger size rocks. A smaller rock material may become a nuisance. Keeping vegetation away from the home is also a benefit, but also ensuring it is well irrigated and maintained. Having the right vegetation may also reduce the chance of direct flame or radiant heat on a structure. Some examples of the right vegetation include succulents and aloes. By using some of these tips, this may also meet some of the options we discussed earlier with regards to home hardening. Lastly, keeping combustible material away from the homes. Things such as patio furniture, trash cans, storage, and doormats, which may lead to ignition because of their ability to ignite from falling embers. These are important things to consider before you leave on a vacation or for an extended period of time. You may also want to check the weather outlook for the time you will be away for any hot and windy days. These are parts of the Ready, Set, Go program you will want to plan for. You want to make sure that you're planning, preparing, and staying aware. On the OCFA website, there is a home assessment tool. For those residents in OCFA's jurisdiction, you can go on our website and request an inspector to come to your home to walk you through the home assessment at no cost. Or you can go through the online home assessment tool, which will provide you a report once the assessment is completed. I know we covered quite a bit of material, but really you shouldn't wait to exercise your plan when the fire actually comes. You should exercise it before. We should all take personal responsibility and learn what you can do today. The materials and information discussed are available on our website at ocfa.org/RSG. In closing, I would like to say that OCFA continues to work closely with the Niguel Summit Board and community, as well as the City of Laguna Niguel in a joint effort to raise public awareness and provide community outreach at every opportunity. Once again, I would like to thank the Niguel Summit Board for putting this all together and allowing OCFA to participate. Thank you, and I will be around if anyone has any questions.
After hearing Juan's presentation, you now have a better understanding of the challenges facing our association as we work towards fire safety compliance as mandated by the state of California. To give you some background, please know, as a board, we took our due diligence about these new fire prevention requirements seriously to obtain a better understanding of the large tasks that was in front of us, we began by attending meetings with other HOAs facing the same challenges. And we heard in these meetings from landscape consultants, attorneys, insurance professionals, property managers, and OCFA fire prevention specialists. We continued to meet with our OCFA fire prevention specialists on our slopes and on the Aliso Summit Trail to better understand their requirements. We attended a 2-day National Fire Protection Workshop, which was conducted by the National Fire Protection Association. We took tours with our landscape maintenance company, Mission Landscape, of various Southern California communities to see their solutions for the removal of vegetation on hillsides and what type of replacement vegetation was being planted. Eventually, we submitted our own vegetation management work plan to comply with OCFA requirements. However, at this point, we determined that we needed to hire a consultant because as volunteer board members, we felt that we did not have the expertise for many of the aspects for this type of project, including prior experience in meeting OCFA expectations and requirements, capabilities of providing sustainable landscape design, ability to control the bidding process as well as the research and planning, and finally, we needed project management skills in meeting with the City of Laguna Niguel Planning Department and their third-party landscape consultants, Molten Niguel Water District, and our landscape companies. So we were very lucky to engage the services of Mosaic Consulting, Inc. Joining us now is Lot Steffi, who has been guiding us through this process for the past 18 months. Growing up in Southern California, Lot inherited his enthusiasm for landscaping and forestry from his father, who held a degree in forestry from West Virginia University. That interest grew over the years into a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Horticulture Science from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, an internship at an elite country club, a career at a major theme park, and co-owning an independent landscape consulting company. His extensive experience managing and overseeing landscape installation and maintenance projects offers a unique insight for his clients and the projects he manages. Lot has been a certified arborist through the International Society of Arboriculture for well over 20 years. He is well rooted in the Southern California landscape industry.
Hi, my name is Lot Steffi with Mosaic Consulting Incorporated. We are based in Rancho Santa Margarita and have been providing landscape management and horticultural consulting services for almost 20 years. Between me and my business partner, Devin Sanders, we have almost 65 years of landscape experience. We service a very unique select client group within the Southern Orange County area, and Niguel Summit has become a client approximately 2 years ago. I'm going to kind of jump right into the project that we did for Niguel Summit, which started as really a master plan for what we're calling the defensible space. So you've probably heard Jim and Rod and Juan with Orange County Fire Authority for sure talk about this 100 feet of defensible space in and around properties, residential units within the community. What our project focused on was creating this master plan that would focus over approximately 15 years in deciding what areas that we're going to be focusing on first, the priority areas, the financial implications of this project, more importantly from the horticulture level, what plant material is going to be removed, what plant material is going to be planted back for the ongoing success of landscape maintenance throughout the community. As we look here, this map demonstrates all of the property that is currently maintained and always has been by Niguel Summit Community Association. So all of the grayed out shading is all of the areas that right now are maintained and continuously maintained by your community. So jumping into the project itself, we're going to be focusing on what is going to be removed in this defensible space area. First is the more obvious. It's the dead, dying plant material, something that is obvious that needs to get removed from a fire safety perspective. The other that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is the plant material, and that's Acacia redolens. Was planted originally, first phases of the project over 30 years ago. Appropriate plant material, great for slope stability, erosion control, low maintenance, water use, still is. It's just over the years with advanced technology in fire safety science and the study of fires, it's been determined that this plant creates a significant duff material underneath it as it grows to levels of 5-6 feet tall. We can kind of see this in some of these on-site photographs that were taken out there, to just the mounding effect, how it grows over time. Once again, appropriate from the get-go, low water use, great for slopes. It's just through a lot of research, through recent fires, study of fires, it's been determined that this plant material becomes hazardous. And unfortunately, it's planted in this defensible space zone throughout much of the community. So that's one of the targets that will be removed through this project. What will be remaining? So a lot of the plant material that's also on the slopes out there in Niguel Summit, some other species, Tacoma or Tecamaria, plumbago, the limonium, species like this are acceptable within the Orange County Fire Authority standards and can be maintained. So a lot of our interior streets, our single loaded slopes, stuff like that, this material will be left in place. It will be maintained. It will be cut down to obviously meet the requirements of 2 feet, but it will remain in place on our slopes. So kind of jumping in to where, right? Where will this occur throughout the neighborhoods? Going back to the original map, it's the 100 feet defensible space. Everything in green on this map either shows your current fuel modification zones, and I'll show you the difference between that and our 100-foot defensible space, and the 100 feet of defensible space marked in the green around all of the properties. Now let's look at the plant palette that we're going to be using to replant these areas on the slope, right? We've talked about what's coming out. We've talked about where it's coming out. We want to get into what's going to be planted back in these areas and the process that we had in determining what that plant material would be. Starting once again about 1.5 years ago, this was one of our primary objectives in developing the master plan as well as the preview slope. So the preview slope has selected a compilation of approximately 5 different species that it's our intention to repeat that species group throughout all of the defensible space areas that will get replanted. One reason for that is consistency and maintainability, as well as vetting all of these species through the process of not only Orange County Fire Authority, but also Molten Niguel Water District, the City of Laguna Niguel, the city staff, the city's consultants that have also reviewed the original plans for the preview slope in conjunction with your landscape committee and your board of directors, us as consultants, as well as your landscape maintenance contractor mission. So there were many, many stakeholders involved in coming up with the plant palette that was selected to go back with. And I'll run through each plant and the positive characteristics and some of the reasons of why we chose that particular plant. The first one, it's going to seem a little redundant because it's also acacia, but this is a new variety or new cultivar of Acacia rhodolen's desert carpet. This is a cloned variety that comes from a very specific nursery that ensures the growth habit of how this plant will grow and perform in the landscape. It has all the great characteristics of acacia, which includes low maintenance, extremely low water use, slope stability, erosion control, very maintainable. Literally, when placed and planted appropriately, 20 feet on center, will require very little maintenance throughout the longevity of its lifespan. Acacia rhodolen's desert carpet. So it's very important to know the desert carpet piece versus just the original Acacia rhodolen's genus species. Kind of jump in through another couple slides. In the early spring, you will see nice yellow flowers, as you kind of see in the picture, as well as the low growth habit of this plant, which is what Orange County Fire Authority is really after, is this under 2 foot in our defensible space areas. The next plant that we chose is toyon. It's a California native plant. It's really going to be used as an accent shrub, small tree, large shrub. Like I said, California native, so clicks all the boxes of low water use, very adaptable to our soils, requires very little maintenance, very appropriate for defensible space, fuel modification zones. Also will attract wildlife. A lot of our our native fauna in the area, birds, etc., will harvest, will eat off the berries. So very, very also wildlife friendly. That's what makes this shrub very appropriate for a lot of our wildland interface slopes that we have. Another accent shrub, also small tree that we've chosen, is Arbutus marina specifically. And this will be used a little bit closer, like single loaded streets. It's a little bit more ornamental than the toyon with the red bark. Also getting the flower clusters. It will have some edible berries, not only by animals, but they are also edible for humans. So we'll use this as an accent shrub along our streetscapes, toe of slope, type conditions. Jumping into also trees. We don't plan on removing any trees throughout the defensible space project unless it's diseased, dead, or dying. And in some areas, we will be replanting some areas with trees. So the species that we'll go back with is, once again, a California native, which is the coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia. Very adaptable, very low water use, easy to maintain, provides wildlife habitat. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with coast live oaks in our area. These next two plants that I'm going to talk about, the aloe arborescens, and agave americana, they're what we're calling our heat sink plants. So what I mean by that is that these will not catch fire. These will actually slow a fire down. They've been proven to absorb the heat and the moisture that is contained within these succulent type plants will actually slow a fire down. So this aloe arborescens, very, very common in our our coastal southern Orange County landscapes. Will provide this nice orange bloom in the winter time, which is also a source of nectar for a lot of birds, hummingbirds, etc. during that time of year. This will grow in clumps and in masses. Very little maintenance, very little water required to keep these plants going. The next one that I alluded to, agave americana, this will also be put in small groups at the top of the slope primarily, as well as scattered throughout. This is a little bit more stately of a shrub. These will be maintained as individual clumps throughout the project, but it will kind of give that slope a little bit more definition and a little bit more contrast, rather than just, you know, flat ground cover. And also, once again, we're calling these our heat sink plants out there in this defensible space zone. A couple plants that I alluded to earlier that we're keeping and we're promoting with throughout the project. They are located in a lot of your existing slopes right now. This is Cape honeysuckle is the common name, otherwise called Teckomaria capensis. It's a South African plant as well, much like our aloe arborescens and some of the other plants that we've chosen. So this will be one that will be encouraged to be on the slopes, very maintainable at 2 feet, as well as the rest of the characteristics of low water use, appropriate for our defensible space zones. Once again, it also has a flower attracting wildlife. The other one, Plumbago articulata, easy for me to say, will be also a plant that will be maintained on the slopes, will not be removed, and will be continued to be used throughout our defensible space zones. Now that we've run through the plant palette, I just want to reiterate the process that we went through to select these plants. And really, you know, it's all about partnerships, right? None of this was created in a vacuum by a single individual or a single company or, you know, a single group. Just reiterating the fact that we've worked hand in hand with Orange County Fire Authority on the appropriateness of all of these plants for the defensible space zone, as well as the City of Laguna Niguel, the consultants that work for the City of Laguna Niguel, Molten Niguel Water District, the Niguel Summit Board of Directors, the Niguel Summit Landscape Committee, your maintenance contractor, and obviously, of course, Mosaic Consulting as your horticultural consultant. As we've reviewed all of the partnerships that have gone into this project, we're now going to talk about the process. The process of creating the master plan document or the wildland compliance audit. This master plan document will guide us, obviously immediately, to undertake a lot of these projects, as well as guide us into the future. Some of the maps that I have showed you already, and we're going to be showing a few more maps, really dive into where these areas are, and more importantly, the square footage of these areas. Once we have the square footage of these areas, then we can start to create budgets, fiscal impacts, and obviously planning to do this work, to begin this renovation work. While we're creating the budget, you know, and the slope selection process, we'll also kind of go through some of the criteria for selection of where these slopes are located within your community and what creates a priority. Also to mention, while we're on this slide, is the role that Mosaic Consulting has played and will continue to play in this process is of obtaining bids. So we will be creating bid specifications, the bid documents, exhibits for the City of Laguna Niguel as we go through each case number. Each case number will have its own project then created and bid out. So we'll be using no less than 3 contractors to bid. Current landscape maintenance contractor will also be included in that process. But for each case number, we will have a competitive bid process that will guide the board, guide the committee through the selection of contractor or contractors to use on each of these projects moving forward. Work area within the 100 feet defensible space. I just want to kind of show another map, another slide here that once again talks about what is fuel modification, which has been ongoing maintenance from the community since day one. This just shows the 100 feet. We'll jump to the next map. This outlines the fuel modification, which is continuous work. It has been continuous work for the community since original design, original development, and original maintenance. So that is ongoing work. The green now starts to pare down what this 100 feet of defensible space looks like in terms of the renovation project. We'll also take out accent corners, a lot of your monuments, and some of the areas that have also been completed kind of like year to date. So you kind of see the different colors there. Preview slope has been completed, our fuel modification zones, the monument locations. So we start to pare down the green area to approximately 3 million, I think we're at 3.3 million square feet of landscape that will have to be renovated, that is contemplated into this master plan from a fiscal impact. So obviously with a project of this magnitude, part of the process is the criteria for slope selection of, where are we going to start. With feedback, obviously from Orange County Fire Authority, they've been out in the community for several years now, inspecting slopes, working with your committee, working with the landscape maintenance contractor, and they have identified through some non-compliance notices on specific properties. So we've taken into consideration those slopes that OCFA has identified. We've also looked at slopes that are adjacent to our wildland interface slopes. Those would be a priority, as that's where obviously a fire can come in from. Also, field observations. Some of this old acacia, it can be 4 feet, 5 feet tall in some areas. It can be 7 to 8 feet tall in other areas. So we also take that into consideration of field conditions of the plant material, not only the acacia, but also dead and dying. And then lastly, we look at internal slopes where we would have this 100 feet. There'd be slopes at the top. There'd be homes at the top and the bottom of the slope. So that 100 feet affects both properties, top and bottom. We've created this exhibit. As you can kind of see, these are our case numbers. Number 1 is the preview slope. That slope has already been completed. Number 2 is the Calle Malaga toe of slope project that's currently in process. Number 3 will be the top of that slope behind Lemur, and then we'll jump over to the other side of the community for case number 4 and 5. And that's really our launching point for this project. I know that was a lot of information for everyone to digest, a lot of new terms, fuel modification zone, defensible space, as well as learning new plants. And as we move forward, we're here as a partner with the community. And with that, I'm Lot Steffi with Mosaic Consulting.
Thank you, Lot. This concludes the presentation portion of the program. And now to our Q&A section. We asked in an email blast for homeowners to submit any questions they may have in advance of this taping. This is not a substitution for a meeting of homeowners, which we are planning, but we thought if we could answer several questions with the experts that we have assembled, this would help with our communication of this massive project. First question. Who paid for the fire mitigation already completed around Clubhouse and Pacific Island? Was it the general fund or did the impacted homeowners get charged for this work? Well, according to our CC&Rs, the cost is absorbed by all homeowners according to section 6.05A. The CC&Rs do not have a method to assess by impacted homeowners. Next question. Is it anticipated that a special assessment or increase in dues will be required to complete this project? How are costs being allocated among the different developments? And this is included with another question that was asked: how is this CASE project being paid for? Is there a special assessment, or do the monthly fees cover the cost? At this time, a special assessment is not being considered. Instead, we are attempting to spread the project over 15 years. An increase in dues may be required since the total cost estimate to remove all the vegetation within 100 feet of each home is over $6.6 million. With projected inflation, it could exceed $8 million over that time frame. Costs are allocated according to the CCRs, which require the owner of each single-family lot or condominium to be charged with one assessment unit for each such lot or condominium owned by him.
So I know we have some questions particular to this project directed on the landscape side of things. So I'm just going to kind of read through some of these questions and do the best to provide answers. Many of the answers were also included in the presentation, but let's just go through some of the questions that you guys had. The first question: could there be increased landslide risks during the rainy season on bare slopes this winter, or even longer term increased risk due to the change in the landscape plants? Any means of reducing this, if so? So we are not a geotechnical consultant firm, but I do know that Niguel Summit Community Association has a geotechnical consultant on board to obviously assist and evaluate these concerns. All of the slopes are evaluated for this potential prior to any work that's being done on any slope, as well as while the work is ongoing. The geotechnical consultant could also probably explain the difference between the soil erosion concerns as well as the potential for a landslide type occurrence or type event. But I can tell you that during the course of construction, pre and post construction installation, all precautions are taking place to obviously minimize any impacts that potential rain events may cause for soil erosion onto the streets and into the drainage systems. Second question, acacia. I alluded in the presentation to Acacia rhodolens and Acacia rhodolens desert carpet. So the question: why were the acacia plants removed on the slopes bordering Pacific Island and Clump House and then replanted? As currently planted, I'm very concerned about the integrity of the slope during heavy rainfall. Are sufficient plants there to hold the soil and prevent a mudslide? So two different plants, the Acacia rhodolens, which was originally planted over 30 years ago, and then the new and improved clone cultivar of Acacia rhodolens desert carpet, which performs all of the same benefits as the original acacia and then some, especially with the growth habit. It grows maximum 2 feet tall when planted per the manufacturer's recommendation of 20 feet on center. So while it seems very small and minuscule on a giant slope, this first year or so, it will root in and it will begin to grow very rapidly. To minimize soil erosion, there was mulch that was also added to the slope. There was the old debris that was also composted and reused on the slope to minimize any erosion type events. Next question: were native plants considered? Were native plants that would require less watering and maintenance and that could provide food and habitat for birds and other animals considered as replacements for the current landscaping? See Moulton Niguel District's program for replacing lawns and non-native shrubs and trees with native plants. All of this was considered. In my presentation, we talked about the numerous stakeholders that participated in our plant selection and the criteria for that, some of which were California native plants, all of which met the criteria of our Mediterranean climate zone. Molten Niguel's obviously mission of lower water use, maintainability, efficiency, as well as fire safety. So yes, a lot of native plants are being used. Other plants were considered, but we also have to keep in mind the maintainability of a commercial landscape is different than a homeowner's backyard. So while a homeowner's backyard may incorporate 20 different species, we really tried to pare it down so that we have this consistent effect throughout the community, which obviously leads to efficient maintainability, back to the fire safety and water use. Next question, very similar. Some of the questions are a little repetitive. Were the long-term costs of trimming, watering, and replanting taken into account when choosing replacement plants? Once the project is complete, can we expect maintenance and water usage to go down, thus reducing HOA costs? All of those things were definitely considered as we were, picking the plant palette for the project. During the presentation, we went into a lot of that, once again, of the selection criteria and all of the stakeholders that were involved in selecting these plants. Just like the fuel modification zones, these defensible space areas will also require ongoing maintenance, into perpetuity for the fire safety aspect of these areas. Directly answering the question of maintenance and water usage to go down, all the plants were selected as low water use plants, just like the acacia rhodolens was there existing now. So that will be a net effect. I think one of the things that we all face when you talk about costs are the challenges of everything being more expensive, labor being more expensive, water being more expensive. So all of this definitely is an attempt to manage those costs from becoming too high. Next question, great question. Will the landscape workers be educated in how to maintain the new plants and adjust water accordingly? They've seen a number of recent cases in the past on a smaller scale where maybe plants have been planted and then died when not properly watered or maintained. We're concerned about a change of this scale. I'll go back to really the answer of, we kept the plant palette small so that we could educate, we could train the on-site landscape maintenance staff in how these plants are to be maintained, what time of year they like to be pruned. Obviously the goal of Orange County Fire Authority of keeping everything in 2 feet. But yes, training for the landscape maintenance staff is critical for all of the plants, for really any project, to be successful. And I'll just go back to the palette selection, took this into consideration, as well as the ongoing effort of your landscape committee, board of directors. One of the roles that Mosaic Consulting also plays in that is that on-site day-to-day training of landscape maintenance personnel. Question, what other agencies or regulators have had a role in reviewing and approving this project? Are there conflicting goals and objectives as a result? So as previously stated, Orange County Fire Authority, the City of Laguna Niguel, their staff as well as their consultants, Molten Niguel Water District, as well as your board of directors, landscape committee, landscape contractor, they all had a role in developing this plant palette and dedicated to the success of it working. Next question. is all this work being done by the current landscaping company who maintains the slopes? Was a job this large put out for bid to be sure we are getting the best value? So once again, great question, and we're glad that you asked it. I did cover it briefly in the presentation, but one of the roles that we do play as an independent consultant is creating the bid specifications, creating bid documents, creating exhibits that will be part of a package that goes out to bid. We like a minimum of 3 contractors to bid each project. Sometimes those end up being the same contractors, especially when we have very competitive numbers. That keeps everybody in the game, it keeps everybody honest, and creates that competitive bid to get the best value moving forward for the community. So Mission Landscape, they are your current landscape maintenance vendor. They have bid on some of these projects. They did the preview slope. Case number 2 went through a bid process. A different contractor was selected for case 2. The name of that contractor is City Green. And as we move forward to case 3, case 4, 5, and beyond, they will all be competitive bid processes.
One of the questions we received was, once this project is completed, will the community be excluded from the very high fire hazard severity zone? The simple answer is no. These maps are published by the state, and there's no action a community or a property owner can do to be excluded from the very high fire hazard severity zone.
Next question. The sample area off Pacific Island Drive and Clubhouse. What area is the poster on Pacific Island and Clubhouse supposed to represent? It appears to have little likeness to what we are currently seeing. So the posters that are down by the preview slope are indicating the projected growth of this plant material. The plant material was installed as smaller plant material, 1 gallon, 5 gallon size, as that's one, horticulturally correct to do because it roots into the soil faster, and also more economical in buying the smaller sizes. Those posters will represent the growth after installation, which began in October of 2020 through December. It took a few months to install all of the plants on that slope. The posters then represent that growth of 1.5 years, 2.5 years, and 3.5 years of what we can anticipate after it roots in and begins to grow and fill in. Primarily, the large spaces, the large gaps that we're seeing are where the acacia desert carpet was planted. The manufacturer or grower of that particular plant recommends that that be planted at 20 feet on center to achieve and really promote the habit of how that plant grows. Of interesting note, in researching back on this project, when we found the original landscape plans from the developer 33 years ago, and the acacia rhodolens was actually planted as a 5-inch pot, so something half again as small as the 1 gallon, but they were planted at 6 feet on center. So we've kind of seen over the course of time, as these plants begin to grow, what a problem this can be as the plants begin to grow on top of each other and really becomes overplanted very quickly, not meeting the current guidelines or standards that are set forth by defensible space areas. So while it may look kind of small and unplanted now at the very beginning, it will grow and establish very quickly and really sets up for the long-term success for these slopes. Next question is very similar to the previous one that we just answered, but go ahead and read it here. The test slopes have mostly dirt and weeds and look terrible. what is being done about the weeds and how long before the slopes fill in. Just to add on to what I was saying regarding the previous question, in the overall design concept for these slopes and the plants that were being used, I'm going to refer back to our conversation in the presentation regarding the aloe and the agave, which we're using as heat sink areas. So a lot of these areas are also designed to have some fallow and bare ground in and around those particular species, as that is also beneficial for the fire safety aspect of really what we're trying to accomplish with the redesign. So some of these bare areas, like I said, in and around our aloe, our agave, will be intentional. They will be set up on so-called, call them islands or heat sink islands in and amongst, the vast spans of ground cover. I think another thing to notice also will be around the arbutus marinas, the toyon, as well as existing trees. The effect of the ground cover immediately adjacent to these shrubs and trees causes, they call it laddering or fire laddering, fuel laddering. So we will have some bare areas in and around the base of existing trees that will be left on site, as well as our groupings of toyon and arbutus, once again to eliminate the fuel fire laddering effect, where it can go from a ground cover to a shrub into a tree and really get going. So some of these spaces will be left intentionally. Others will just take a little bit of time to grow and fill in. We don't want it to fill in too quickly. Obviously, we'll be right back where we were with the fire aspect of overgrowth and overgrown plant material that is too high to maintain. So as it roots in, give it a year, give it a few seasons, you'll start to see tremendous growth from these new young plants. Year three through 5, the landscape will really hit its stride as most things will be flowering, and you'll really start to see the fill-in process as really what a brand new landscape can then kind of offer the community through many of these neighborhoods. The weeds. I did not address the weeds. So obviously with these bare areas do come weeds. So the landscape maintenance contractor, Mission Landscape, they are diligent about weeds throughout the community. Obviously not only in these these project areas, but throughout the community. Weeds are a battle. So this area, just like other parts of the community, are weeded on a regular basis through your maintenance contractor. Kind of jump to the next question. When is the physical work, plant removal, uprooting, mulching, sprinkler reinstallation, and replanting anticipated to start in earnest? So as you know, we've already completed the preview slope. Case number 2 is almost complete, which is along Calle Malaga. And as we kind of move towards the spring months, case number 3, 4, and 5 will begin very, very quickly at the beginning of next year. I'm kind of glad that you also brought up the sprinkler reinstallation, because we really haven't talked too much about the role of Milton Niguel Water District and the irrigation or sprinkler redesign in a lot of these areas. So it's a great opportunity while we're stripping these slopes to also look at the efficiency of the sprinkler nozzles, the heads, the layout, the spacing, much of which are 33 years old. So we're taking this opportunity to comply with a lot of regulations that also affect irrigation overspray, whether it's overspray into V-ditches, overspray into streets. One of our recent, kind of inspections, we actually saw one of those old, and we'll have to put it on line for you guys, but we actually saw one of those like really old impact rain purge, sprinkler heads from back in the day that was just kind of buried in there. So once again, great opportunity to make the irrigation system and the distribution system efficient and spraying where it's supposed to be spraying and eliminating the unwanted runoff. And just real quick, we did talk about, well, the question was plant removal or uprooting. So just to clarify, nothing is being uprooted through any of these slopes either. As you kind of watch the guys work, all of the acacia stumps, they're just being flush cut right at grade. So none of the stumps are being taken out. The existing root systems of all of that plant material, remain in place. Obviously, the integrity of the slope, as there's been some questions, is utmost importance. And just to kind of emphasize that none of the root systems, none of the trunks are being removed. They're being flush cut, they're being ground in place to keep the integrity of all of those slopes. I have just a couple more questions here. Question, I have heard that the particular plant that is called for comes from a sole source. Is this wise? Are there no viable alternatives? So back to our favorite, I think, word of the day is acacia. So the plant that you're referring to is Acacia rhodolen's desert carpet. Desert carpet, this is a cloned plant. It's patented and trademarked by Mountain States Wholesale Nursery, which is located in Arizona. It falls under all of the patent laws, just like somebody would invent, a widget. This plant was invented, was cloned, genetically identical to its counterparts to perform as intended on the slopes, which is that super low growth habitat. So there can be at times availability issues, but obviously through project planning and communication, with the nursery, we can make these, available for our project. As far as the cost of the plant material from the nursery, it's no different than, if we're buying, let's just say a lantana or a bougainvillea or something that's, commonly grown throughout the industry. So the one reason why it is, I guess, from a sole source is that it is a patented and trademarked plant by that nursery. And I think we have maybe one more question. What slopes are subject to the fire defensible space work and which are excluded? That was probably covered in depth by Juan with OCFA, but essentially the simple answer is 100 feet. So it's 100 feet defensible space from a property. And with that, I think that concludes the question and answer portion. I'm Lot Steffi with Mosaic Consulting.
Thanks for watching our presentation, and I hope it answered many of your questions. We hope that many of you may wish to get involved, either through running as a district delegate or the board of directors, or participation on the landscape committee or the architectural committee. Also, it's important to stay informed through our e-blast communications, either through the providing of your email address to the management company or viewing the email blast on the Niguel Summit website. If you have any questions, please reach out to our management company. Thanks for tuning in.